Hello and welcome back to Bookish. Today I wanted to do what I think is the last story from Dubliners that I'm doing as part of Alan at Big Hard Books and Classics Dubliners Read Along. And today the video is going to be about the story A Painful Case. So A Painful Case to me seems like a relatively simple, straightforward story. I can't wait for Alan's video response to me to tell me all the really cool stuff in the story that I missed. But essentially it's the story of Mr. Duffy. Mr. Duffy lives alone, he works alone, he spends all his time alone. He has his home, his apartment set up just like he wants it in a very neat, orderly way. He is a creature of habit who does essentially the same thing over and over again. He doesn't associate with people outside of work other than his family members on special occasions and for funerals. And essentially he just lives alone. He lives unto himself. His bookshelf would indicate that he is a thinker, a reader, someone who likes to believe that they have deep thoughts. He has a writing desk and notebooks and folders in which he occasionally writes things. But we don't know what he writes, and we don't know exactly what his thoughts are always. Mr. Duffy's life changes when he meets a married woman and her daughter at a concert, and they unexpectedly strike up a conversation. And after that conversation, they make arrangements to meet with one another. Those meetings become more frequent. They share more and more of their lives with one another. And sooner or later, Mr. Duffy is actually going over to her home. Her husband apparently is okay with this, and Joyce implies that her husband thinks that maybe Mr. Duffy is there because he's interested in their daughter, who's a young woman. But what the husband doesn't see is the interest between Mr. Duffy and his wife. So one night when they are essentially alone, by the way, her husband is a sea captain, so he's gone for long periods of time. One night, essentially when they're alone, the woman makes her feelings known to Mr. Duffy, that she wants more than just this kind of friendship, this intellectual kinship which they seem to have worked out, in which he can, share with her all of his ideas, that she wants a physical relationship. She grabs his hand, she presses it to her cheek, and he is stunned and apparently, at least on the surface, disappointed by this. He breaks off their friendship, and they don't see each other anymore. Years go by, Mr. Duffy returns to his routine, and then he sees a story in the newspaper, and come to find out that the woman who he had this, I'm just going to call it an affair, even though it wasn't a physical affair with, has died, that she'd been run over by a train. When he reads the story further, he finds out that she had turned to drink in the couple of years, in the last 2 years of her life, and that's probably how she had stumbled in front of the train and been killed by the tram. Maybe not a train, but the tram car had killed her. Mr. Duffy's initial reaction is that he's disgusted by the way that she died. He is angry that she had kind of defiled their friendship in this way. But clearly he is dealing with feelings of guilt. He can't stay at home. He wants to go, he has to leave the home. He goes to the bar. He has a couple of drinks at the bar, which is out of his routine, I'll point out. And then he begins to realize that he has in effect killed this woman by withholding his love from her. That because he broke off their relationship, she lost hope. Clearly, I think we can infer that she is unhappy in her marriage, and that she had hoped that Mr. Duffy could take her away from that, or at least giving her something meaningful, and he was unwilling to do this. And so he comes to the realization that he has in fact contributed to her demise by withholding his love. He leaves the bar. He wanders in the park. He interrupts lovers in their assignations in the park, and he can tell that they wish he would just leave so they could get back to what they were doing. And it's at that moment that he realizes he's alone. He's alone, and he's going to always be alone. And he no doubt feels regret for what he's done to this woman and to himself. And that's more or less where the story A Painful Case ends. But it is a beautiful story. It is simply told. Like I was kind of joking around about Alan coming on and doing a video response, which I do look forward to Alan coming on and doing a video response in which he describes all the various kind of hidden pieces of information in the story. But even without all that, you can just read it as a simple, beautiful story about love and regret and loneliness. And it is, in fact, a painful case. There are a couple of things in the story that I just thought were really interesting. Number one, I kind of thought it was interesting that the woman in this case dies. Her name, by the way, is Sunoco. That's her last name. That the woman in this case dies by being hit by a train. And this brought to mind automatically, in my mind, Anna Karenina. And Anna Karenina's death by being hit by a train. And, you know, the obvious parallels of unfaithfulness. In the case of Mr. Duffy and Mrs. Sunoco, that unfaithfulness is mental and emotional and not physical. That there's a similarity there, and it made me curious if Joyce had done that on purpose, if that maybe there was some kind of subconscious way to try to tie that story of infidelity in, and that story of hopelessness on the part of tying Mrs. Sunoco's hopelessness to Anna Karenina's hopelessness in that novel. And then I just thought there was just an incredibly interesting line. So here's the line, and this is Mr. Duffy thinking. Love between man and man is impossible because there must not be sexual intercourse, and friendship between man and woman is impossible because there must be sexual intercourse. What a strange line. On the one hand, it kind of sounds like almost a line from When Harry Met Sally. I don't know if you've seen that old movie from the 80s, in which the character Harry basically says that men and women can't be friends because the man always wants to sleep with the woman. But the first part of that line, love between man and man is impossible because there must not be sexual intercourse. Mr. Duffy is suppressing his own homosexuality. That, you know, Mr. Duffy maybe rejects Mrs. Sunoco's physical advances, because he doesn't desire her in that way. My first reaction was that it's that Harry Met Sally thing, that men and women can't be friends because the man always wants to sleep with the woman. So what actually is being said here is that Mr. Duffy's coming to grips with the reality of his own homosexuality in this really repressed society, and that this then leads him to seek friendship from Mrs. Sunoco, which they can't have because there has to be sex between men and women for them to be friends, and he's not able to do that, and this then dooms him to loneliness. It is a beautiful, exquisite, well-written story, and even though I've given a fairly good synopsis of the story, if you're interested in reading Dubliners, I hope you will read A Painful Case, because I just think it's a great story. Anyway, look forward to seeing your comments in the comment section. I'll leave a link to Alan's Dubliners, latest Dubliners video in the show description down below. And as always, thank you.